Hungarian POW women, in tears when American soldiers protected them from their own officers. They were told the Americans would strip them of dignity. But when Hungarian women were marched into a prisoner-of-war camp in southern France in autumn 1944, they expected foreign soldiers to mock their surrender and their own officers to remind them of their shame. Instead, something impossible happened. When a Hungarian commander raised his hand to strike a woman for accepting food, an American guard caught his wrist mid-swing and said, "You don't own them here." The women cried that night, not from punishment but from confusion. The enemy had just become their shield and nothing made sense anymore. If you want to hear more untold stories from World War II, make sure to like this video and subscribe. These hidden truths deserve to be remembered. The first thing they noticed wasn't the barbed wire. It was the smell of bread. Fresh bread, yeast, and warmth on the autumn wind. After days in cramped trucks, after weeks of retreat through bombed villages, after months of rationed black bread that tasted like sawdust, the scent hit them like a memory from another life. 200 Hungarian women stood in the camp yard, filthy, exhausted, hollow-eyed. Their uniforms were torn, their boots caked with mud from the long collapse westward. Some were nurses, clerks, radio operators who'd served with Hungarian forces allied to Germany. When the war turned and the front crumbled, they found themselves captured, not celebrated. American soldiers watched from the edges. Some leaned against jeeps, others stood near tin-roofed buildings. They didn't look cruel. They looked tired, curious, mostly indifferent. That confused the women more than anything. They had been warned. American soldiers were barbaric, godless. They would laugh at captured women, humiliate them, strip away every ounce of honor. The propaganda had been clear. But then they saw trays of food being carried past. Bread, soup, real meat. One woman whispered, "Don't look at it. Hunger is safer than hope." On the far edge stood 6 Hungarian officers, also prisoners, but their uniforms still buttoned tight, still pressed. Their faces were stone. One lieutenant with iron-gray hair and cold blue eyes scanned the women with an expression that made their spines stiffen. They knew that look. It meant, "You are still soldiers of Hungary." An American guard approached one woman, young, maybe 22. He held an orange. He offered it with a shy half-smile. The woman stared. She hadn't seen fresh fruit in 8 months. She hesitated, then took it. Her hands shook. Across the yard, the Hungarian lieutenant pulled a small notebook from his pocket and wrote her name. That night, as the smell of fresh bread drifted through the barracks, the woman who took the orange was punished until she could no longer stand. The Americans saw none of it. Yet, dawn came cold and gray. The women stood in formation in the yard, backs straight, eyes forward. The Hungarian lieutenant paced in front of them, his boots crunching on gravel. "You are still soldiers of Hungary," he said, his voice cutting through the morning air. "Surrender does not erase your duty. It does not erase your shame." The women stared ahead, faces blank. "You will not smile at the Americans. You will not speak to them unless ordered. You will not accept their gifts or favors." He stopped, scanning their faces. "Every kindness they show you is an insult to what you were. Every comfort you take is a betrayal of those still fighting." His eyes landed on the woman who had taken the orange. She stood near the back, face bruised, one eye swollen shut. She hadn't been allowed to sleep. She'd stood at attention through the night while the other women lay in their bunks, listening to her quiet sobs. "This is what happens when you forget who you are," the lieutenant said, gesturing toward her. "Cheap virtue, disgrace." The woman's legs trembled, but she didn't collapse. The lieutenant turned to the others. "You think because the war is over, you are free? You think because you are prisoners, discipline no longer matters?" He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "When you return home, if you return home, people will ask what you did here. They will ask if you kept your honor or if you ate from the enemy's hand like animals." The women felt the words like blows. Shame tightened around their chests. They had survived the war, but survival felt like guilt. "Remember," the lieutenant said, "I see everything. I write down everything." Behind him, 50 yards away, American guards stood near the mess hall. They drank coffee, talked quietly, looked bored. They weren't watching. They weren't listening. The real danger, for now, didn't come from men with foreign accents. It came from the uniforms the women had been taught to trust. Zsofia was 24 and had worked as a nurse in Budapest before the war. Now she moved through the camp like a shadow, quiet, always watching. In the yard that afternoon, she carried a bucket of water from the pump. The sun was warm. For a moment, she almost felt normal. Then the Hungarian lieutenant walked past. Zsofia froze. Her shoulders tensed. She turned her face away, eyes locked on the ground. She didn't breathe until he was gone. Minutes later, a young American corporal approached. He nodded at her. "Ma'am," he said simply, gesturing toward the barracks. "You need help with that?" Zsofia looked up, surprised. She shook her head. "No, thank you." The corporal smiled and walked on. Zsofia's shoulders dropped. She exhaled. Corporal Danny Miller noticed. He'd been watching the women for 3 days now, and something didn't sit right. The bruises, for one thing, fresh ones appearing on arms, shoulders, backs. The way the women moved in the yard, stiff, careful, like they were walking on glass. But it was the fear that caught his attention. They didn't flinch when American guards walked by. Some even made eye contact, asked questions in broken English. But when their own officers appeared, the women went rigid, heads down, hands clenched. Miller mentioned it to Sergeant Harris that evening. "You see how they act around those Hungarian officers?" Harris lit a cigarette. "What about it?" "They're terrified, and look at this." Miller gestured toward a group of women sitting near the barracks. "Bruises, new ones every couple days." Harris frowned. "You think we're doing that?" "No," Miller said slowly. "That's the thing. They're not afraid of us." They watched as one of the Hungarian officers crossed the yard. Instantly the women stopped talking. One stood up quickly, as if caught doing something wrong. Miller's jaw tightened. "You notice that? They're not afraid of us. They're afraid of them." Harris exhaled smoke. "That's a problem." "Yeah," Miller said. "It is." The dining hall smelled like a dream they'd forgotten. Soup, fresh bread, coffee, real coffee, not the burned grain water they'd choked down for months. The scent of stew, thick with vegetables and meat, metal trays clattered. Steam rose from serving pans. The women moved in stiff lines, unsure. They held their trays with both hands, eyes darting between the food and the American cook behind the counter. The cook, a large man with kind eyes and an apron stained with grease, gestured broadly. "Take what you want, ladies. Don't be shy." The translator repeated it in Hungarian. "Take what you want." The words felt like a test, a trap maybe. They'd been punished for taking an orange. What would happen if they filled their plates? But hunger won. Slowly, carefully, they began. Bread, a ladle of stew, a piece of meat. Some took fruit, hands trembling. Zsofia sat at a long wooden table with 5 other women. She stared at her tray. It was more food than she'd seen in one place in over a year. She picked up a piece of bread, still warm. She tore it slowly, brought it to her mouth, and bit down. The taste broke something inside her. Tears came without warning, silent and hot. Around her, other women cried too. Not loud sobs, just quiet streams down sunburned cheeks. They weren't crying just from relief. They were crying from guilt. "My family," one woman whispered. "I don't even know if they have bread." "My mother is in Budapest," another said. "The city is starving and I'm eating meat." Across the hall, Corporal Miller approached their table. He tried a few words in broken Hungarian. "Good? Food? Good?" One woman looked up. Her lips almost formed a smile. Then she saw him. The Hungarian lieutenant stood near the door, arms crossed, jaw tight, fists clenched, watching. The woman's face went blank. She looked down at her tray and didn't speak again. Miller noticed. He followed her gaze, saw the officer, and understood. That evening, after the sun set and the Americans retreated to their quarters, the lieutenant called 6 women to the side of the barracks, out of view, in shadow. Zsofia was one of them. "You ate well today," he said, his voice quiet but sharp. "You ate like pigs from the enemy's trough." The women stood at attention, eyes forward. "Your brothers are dying on what's left of the front. Your families are starving in Budapest. And you sit in a warm hall, smiling at American men, filling your bellies with their charity." Zofia's throat tightened. She wanted to say they hadn't smiled, that they'd only eaten because they were told to. But she said nothing. "Do you think," the lieutenant continued, stepping closer, "that anyone will respect you when this is over? Do you think Hungary will welcome you home with honor after you've spent your days accepting gifts from the enemy?" One woman whispered, "We were hungry." The lieutenant's eyes went cold. "Then you should have starved with dignity." He made them stand at attention for 2 hours, arms at their sides, backs straight, no water, no sitting. When one woman's legs buckled, he forced her to stand again. "This is discipline," he said. "This is what keeps you from becoming animals." Later, in the barracks, the women lay in their bunks and whispered in the dark. "Are we betraying Hungary just by eating? Is it wrong to feel safer with the Americans than with our own officers?" "I don't know anymore," another voice answered. "I don't know what honor means when it requires us to suffer for no reason. But if we don't obey him, what are we?" Silence. "Survivors," someone finally said. But the word felt hollow. In their minds the war was still being fought, not with bullets or bombs, but with guilt, with shame, with the terrible weight of wondering if staying alive meant losing everything they thought they were. Corporal Miller kept a notebook. He wasn't supposed to, but he did it anyway. Day 4. Woman with dark hair, bruise on left shoulder, fresh. Day 6. Same woman, bruise darker, new one on right arm. Day 8. 3 women with visible marks, all after evening roll call. He showed it to Sergeant Harris in the command tent. "Look at this pattern," Miller said. "The bruises show up after the Hungarian officers have their meetings with the women. Always at night, always out of our sight." Harris studied the notes, his face grim. "You think our guards are doing this?" "No, sir. I've watched. Our men don't touch them, but their officers do." Captain Lawson, the camp commander, leaned back in his chair. He was 42, a lawyer from Pennsylvania before the war. "They have their own chain of command. We can't just interfere with that." "With respect, sir," Miller said, "they're prisoners of war under our custody. We're responsible for their safety." Lawson rubbed his temples. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we make it clear that no prisoner, regardless of rank, has the right to physically harm another prisoner in this camp." Harris nodded. "International law supports that. Geneva Convention is clear. Prisoners must be protected from violence, including from each other." "And if the Hungarian officers resist?" Lawson asked. "Then we enforce it," Miller said. "Same way we'd enforce it if anyone else was beating prisoners under our watch." Lawson was quiet for a long moment. Outside, they could hear the evening roll call, Hungarian voices shouting commands, women responding in unison. "All right," Lawson finally said. "Spread the word to the MPs. If any officer, American, Hungarian, doesn't matter, raises a hand to those women, we intervene. We document it. and we make it clear that this is American soil and American rules apply." Miller nodded. "Thank you, sir." That night, he walked his patrol route past the Hungarian barracks. He stopped, listened. Next time, he thought, next time I see him touch one of them, I'm stepping in. It happened on a Tuesday. The dining hall was full. 200 women sat at long tables eating lunch. The clatter of forks and trays echoed off the walls. The smell of vegetable soup and fresh bread filled the air. The women were more relaxed than they'd been in weeks. Some talked quietly. A few even smiled at small jokes shared in whispers. The Americans had been kind. The food was good. For brief moments they forgot where they were. At the far table, a young woman named Ilona sat with her tray. She was 19, had worked as a clerk in an army office in Budapest. She was still learning that hunger didn't have to be a constant companion. She looked at the serving line. There was extra bread today, more than enough. She stood, walked to the counter, and took another piece. Just one. She held it carefully, returned to her table, and placed it on her tray. Her hands shook slightly. She knew she was allowed to take it. The American cook had said so, but old fears died hard. Then the door slammed open. The Hungarian lieutenant strode into the hall. His boots struck the floor like hammers. Conversations died instantly. Forks froze mid-air. He surveyed the room with disgust. His eyes landed on Ilona. He crossed the hall in long strides, stopped at her table. "You," he said coldly, "stand up." Ilona stood, trembling. "You think you deserve 2 pieces of bread?" His voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. "You eat like an animal, like a pig at the enemy's trough." He grabbed the bread from her tray and threw it to the floor. "You disgrace Hungary with every bite." He raised his hand, palm open, ready to strike her across the face. The entire hall went silent. 200 women held their breath. The blow never landed. Corporal Miller's hand caught the lieutenant's wrist mid-swing. "That's enough," Miller said quietly. The lieutenant spun, fury in his eyes. "She is my soldier." "She is a prisoner of the United States Army," Miller said, his voice calm but firm. "You don't own them here." Sergeant Harris stepped forward, his hand resting near his holster. Not threatening, but present. 2 other MPs moved closer. "Step away from the table, sir," Harris said. The lieutenant's face went red. "You have no authority over—" "In this camp we do," Miller interrupted. "Geneva Convention. No prisoner harms another prisoner. That includes you." For 5 long seconds, no one moved. Then the lieutenant lowered his arm. He looked at the women, at the Americans, at the bread on the floor. He turned and walked out. The hall remained frozen. Then Ilona began to cry, not from pain or fear, but from shock. One by one, the other women cried too. Silent tears streaming down their faces. They had just watched the enemy stop their own officer from striking one of them. The world had stopped making sense. Word spread through the camp in hours. Women whispered in the barracks, replaying the moment over and over. "Did you see the Americans stop him?" He grabbed his wrist, just stopped him. "He said we don't belong to them anymore." The Hungarian officers gathered in their quarters that night, voices raised. The lieutenant who'd been stopped was furious. Another officer tried to calm him. "We've lost authority," one said quietly. They saw it happen. The Americans formalized the new rule the next morning. Captain Lawson called the Hungarian officers to his office and made it clear: no physical discipline, no striking, no punishment, no intimidation. Any violation would result in isolation. The officers left the meeting in silence, their power visibly shattered. The women felt the shift immediately. They sat a little straighter at meals. Some made eye contact with the American guards and offered small smiles. A few even laughed at something, genuine laughter that rang out in the yard. Zsofia stood near the water pump, watching the Hungarian lieutenant cross the yard. For the first time, she didn't look away. She didn't flinch. He saw her watching. He turned and walked in the other direction. That evening, one woman said to another, "I don't feel afraid anymore. Not of him." A single, blocked slap had done what months of captivity never could. It broke the illusion that their officers were untouchable. The war, the real war, was finally over. Years later, Zsofia would tell her granddaughter about that moment in the dining hall. "We were taught that the enemy was evil," she said, "that our officers represented honor, but the men who spoke about honor used shame and fear to control us. The enemy enforced something different: protection, boundaries, dignity." She paused, remembering. When that American corporal stopped the lieutenant's hand, I understood something. True honor isn't about uniforms or flags. It's about how you treat the vulnerable when you have the power to look away. For those Hungarian women, the tears they cried that day marked the moment the world stopped being simple. Enemy and ally, honor and shame, all the clear lines they'd been taught blurred into something more human. Stories like this rarely make it into textbooks, the moments when mercy, not violence, defines who the real protectors are. If you want more hidden stories like this, where history isn't just dates and battles, but human beings breaking the rules of hatred, make sure you like this video and subscribe. It tells us who we were and who we still have the chance to be.